No matter which side of the aisle you sit on, we can all agree that most politicians deserve to be mocked just a little bit. Which is why today we're looking at some of Family Guy's greatest parodies and roasts of American presidents, politicians, and pundits. Starting with the very first president of the United States, George Washington, a man known for his unflinching honesty.
George, did you chop down our cherry tree?
I cannot tell a lie. Yes.
Unfortunately, that wasn't necessarily a trait that was passed down to future presidents. I think he actually had to be an excellent liar in order to take office.
And what is this pamphlet I found under your bed called the Boston He Party?
Not mine!
Oh, so that's why Washington didn't have any children. He really was a trailblazer in more ways than one. And he was always prepared for anything, crossing the Delaware River with the same precautions as a child in a kiddie pool.
What's on his arms?
Those are water wings. He was terrified of the water.
Easy!
Which is funny because in reality, Washington was apparently an avid swimmer. I guess history just never specified how he did his swimming. Nothing wrong with wearing water wings while middle-aged. You know, just as long as you're remembered for something great, like founding a nation. Hop to it, guys. And while he never became president, his status as one of the founding fathers is enough to land Alexander Hamilton on this list. Also known as the subject of that musical everyone in the world said was amazing but you never saw, the first US Secretary of the Treasury was fatally wounded in a duel by Vice President Aaron Burr, and Family Guy theorizes it would have gone down a lot differently if they didn't have guns.
8, 9, 10, and turn!
It's honestly how all political disagreements should be settled, with a little slap fight. It only takes a few smacks upside the head to make you realize that political infighting is dumb, and that energy could be spent on more important things, writing sick raps. And up next is the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. Most depictions of Lincoln have him adorned with a tall hat that would make Doug Dimmadome blush, though it may have been a contributing factor that led to his assassination.
Stupid hat. Damn it. I paid 15 cents for this ticket.
I get where he's coming from. People being distracting during movies has me feeling like John Wilkes Booth too. Lincoln was known for a lot of great things, but proper theater etiquette might not have been one of them.
Hey, I hear you took that black chick home. Hey, you're welcome. Ha!
Yes, perhaps Lincoln's most widely known success was the act of the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared the freedom status of over 3 million slaves in Confederate states. A positive moment in human history, but like most things, there's always going to be some detractors.
I noticed your lawn's getting a little high.
Yeah, I used to have a guy for that.
It truly was dark times before the invention of the lawnmower. Now you can just have an AstroTurf lawn, in case you want to look like a settler on a football field. And next up is the 18th President, Ulysses S. Grant. Once the dominant commander of the Union Army, Grant would eventually become president, and according to some sultry photos found in Cherrywood Manor, it seems he liked to partake in some brotheling.
Cherrywood was America's first presidential house. See, there's Lincoln, Grant, Robert E. Lee.
It speaks to the unity of the country that two men who fought against each other like Grant and Lee could come together to enjoy the services of women under the same roof. Also, saying it was the first presidential sin house implies that there are others out there. Those might be a more tightly held secret than Area 51. But while Grant is generally held in high regard, you might hear a different story depending on what part of the country you're in.
I was busy looking for your wife to give her the old...
Yeah, some people are probably still a little sore about losing the war, so they have to cope any way they can, like focusing on Grant's occasional foray into the world of alcohol. See, this is the danger of getting too into fanfiction and starting to believe it's canon.
I am vanquished.
I hereby declare victory in the name of the Confederacy.
And next we have the 26th President, Theodore Roosevelt. While he was known for overseeing the construction of the Panama Canal, increasing conservation efforts, and being the first president to win a Nobel Peace Prize, some still think that his inclusion on Mount Rushmore isn't entirely justified.
I won the Revolutionary War.
I won the Civil War.
I gained possession of Guam.
I guess you're really only worth immortalizing if you win a major war. Really though, the mountain definitely needed more mustache representation. We couldn't just let whatever botch job Lincoln had going on to be the mountain's only example of facial hair. And coming right after him is the 27th President, William Howard Taft. The man was the first to serve as both the US President and Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, but most of his legacy probably revolves around his weight. The man was an absolute unit, and there's a long persisting rumor that he once got stuck in the White House bathtub and needed assistance getting out. While there's no solid evidence of this, it did give the president a bit of a mythology, something Brian aimed to turn into a musical.
Who's that presidential chub got stuck in the White House tub?
Well, it's no Hamilton. At least Hamilton had a lot to sing about. I don't know if I can sit through a 2-hour musical about how fat a guy was. I hear enough of that from my parents. I don't need to hear Brian do it too. And next up is the 28th President, Woodrow Wilson. Known for leading the US through World War I and enacting the 19th Amendment granting women's suffrage, Wilson would also oversee the completion of the Panama Canal after it was started by Roosevelt.
You reach down between my legs. Ease the seat back. Got the feeling.
So that's where Van Halen got the lyrics for their song Panama. Forget all the other accomplishments I mentioned, this is Woodrow Wilson's greatest service to America. Put him on Mount Rushmore already. And the US would see another Roosevelt take office with the 32nd President, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Serving a historic 4 terms and leading the US out of the Great Depression and into World War II, Roosevelt would lose the use of his legs, so the US government chose to hide this to maintain his image through various means.
We're going to end this depression, and there's no reason to suspect that I cannot walk.
I think in real life they only portrayed him from the chest up, but the marionette strings would have been a good touch as well. A lot of people say the presidents are merely puppets for unseen forces, but Roosevelt could have been the country's first literal puppet president.
The newsreel's over. Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome, gentlemen.
And up next is the 33rd President of the United States, Harry Truman. Known for ending World War II and establishing NATO, Truman is perhaps most well known in pop culture for a photo of him holding a newspaper that erroneously reports that his opponent was going to beat him for the presidency. Of course, Family Guy is a big fan of this image too.
Harry Truman, stupid jerk, freaking FDR's ass.
I mean, if the vote came down to a homicidal baby or someone who wasn't that, I think we probably know who would have won. Then again, a lot of people voted for Kanye West in previous elections, so the winner might not be as obvious nowadays. Just remember that you can't always trust what you read in the papers. And if you are reading the papers, why? Don't you know what year it is? And up next is John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the US, who is actually skated by being shown in the show. But the show does love to make mentions to that one particular part of his presidency a lot.
So I guess Lee Harvey Oswald never shot Kennedy?
Nope, he shot Mayor McCheese.
Yeah, despite handling the Cuban Missile Crisis and leading the United States into the space race, this is the moment the show tends to reference the most when talking about Kennedy. But did you notice the Who Else But Quagmire guy watching from the lawn? Someone needs to track him down and find out what he knows about what happened that day.
That joke's not in bad taste, right?
Oh, who cares? He's a cheeseburger.
And our 37th president was Richard Nixon, who unfortunately had most of his presidential legacy overshadowed by the Watergate scandal, where his administration was caught trying to plant listening devices in the Democratic National Committee's headquarters. He became the only president in history to resign from office, and his prior refusal to acknowledge any wrongdoing has been joked about in Family Guy before.
Well, then it's a good thing I have this. I am not a crook.
Except that's not a Nixon mask. That's a Ronald Reagan mask, but the "I'm not a crook" quote is associated with Nixon. I guess this is just done to show how dumb Peter is, but if you don't know your American history, you probably wouldn't have been any the wiser. At least Cleveland probably knows what mask he has on.
Hey, look, it's President Nixon! No, wait, it's a black guy! No, it's Nixon.
I wouldn't have wanted Nixon on the golf course either. If he's willing to cheat his way into politics, then you just know he's tapping balls into holes while he's golfing. And speaking of Ronald Reagan, he's next up as America's 40th president. The former actor turned politician helped end the Cold War and led to the dissolution of the Berlin Wall, something he tried to do with his own 2 hands in Family Guy.
Tear it down. Reagan smash. Reagan smash.
You know, he just gets a little confused from time to time. I support him on this mission though. McDonald's has been getting by for too long serving us unhealthy slop, and most importantly, never having the Happy Meal toy you want every time you go. These are the issues our current politicians need to be running on.
Oh, it's just Reagan. Just leave him alone. He'll tire himself out.
Reagan sleepy.
And Ronald Reagan and his wife Nancy Reagan were both at the center of the AIDS crisis in America back in the 80s, the handling of which has earned them a ton of criticism over the years.
Will you make me the happiest man in the world by turning a blind eye to the AIDS crisis?
I mean, you can probably be happy and acknowledge a growing deadly disease that killed thousands of people, but I understand relationships are all about compromise. The delayed response to the health crisis is perhaps the biggest blot on Reagan's administration, along with the war on drugs. But hey, at least it led to a happy marriage. While the couple seemed happily married to the public, Family Guy likes to imagine that Reagan's relationship with Soviet Union President Mikhail Gorbachev was a bit more personal than professional.
Well, you could say that. There was a missile,
And something definitely got packed.
Usually the phrase "in bed with foreign leaders" is just a figure of speech, but maybe it was taken literally on a few occasions. Hey, whatever gets us closer to world peace. More world leaders need to be prepared to pucker up. And did you know that Reagan was almost shot dead 2 months into his term? Well, he wasn't the only one shot at that time, as White House Press Secretary James Brady was also shot during the attempted assassination, though he made it out a bit worse than the president.
So I got my handgun, and I'm just randomly firing it into a crowd of people, and then...
And then what?
Yeah, suddenly indiscriminately shooting people isn't so funny, is it? Okay, well, it wasn't funny to begin with, but it's extra not funny in the presence of James Brady. Did you know the guy who shot him, John Hinckley Jr., has a Twitter account and a YouTube account where he showcases his music? The world really is wild sometimes. And next up is the 42nd US president, Bill Clinton. Clinton was actually the first president to be parodied on the show, appearing in Family Guy's first ever episode.
Why do you think the American public has continued to support you throughout these impeachment proceedings?
Probably because you're so fat.
Yeah, so this show is being written during the impeachment process of the president, who had lied under oath to conceal an affair he was having with a White House intern. And that pretty much means the show could portray him as the biggest buffoon around. He was also shown naked a bunch. Not really sure what's going on there.
Liberal chubby chaser! Oh, well, if you can't laugh at yourself.
And Clinton would also be the first president to get a full episode revolving around roasting him in Season 5's Bill and Peter's Bogus Journey.
All right, girls, I've turned off the AC. First one to have a bead of neck sweat reach their butt crack wins.
So Bill ends up hanging out with Peter after the latter gets hurt fixing his limo. After all, both have been at pretty low points. Peter hurt his back and Clinton was impeached, which are probably both equal in severity.
After my bypass, I remember wondering if it was all downhill from there. But then I realized it doesn't have to be.
If a disgraced president can live a happy life, then so can Peter. Especially because being a former president gets Bill access to a ton of fun, like dibs on the Dance Dance Revolution game at Chuck E. Cheese.
Watch the screen, not your feet.
Bill, shut up! I got it!
Number 32.
Oh no, a pizza's ready!
Tag out, man.
I always knew that rat was a CIA asset. How else could Bill go to a children's pizza restaurant and dance uninterrupted? And there are plenty more ideas up Bill's sleeves, like doing a prank call.
Is this Linda Tripp?
Yes.
You shouldn't have talked, you stupid! I hope you die!
Got her! She totally got. I guess that makes her and Bill even for blowing the Monica Lewinsky scandal wide open. That, unfortunately, was not the kind of blowing Bill had in mind. But Bill decides to suggest he and Peter do some blowing of their own, a blowing of smoke.
So what do you want to do next?
Go to Mars, dude.
Glad to see some presidents are still putting a focus on space travel. Although this kind of space travel costs way less, it probably has a higher chance of seeing an alien.
We could eat that pig.
What?
Dude, come on. We could totally eat that pig.
They don't actually eat the pig, but that just means the Griffins are left with a live pig, which might just be worse. Who would have thought a disgraced politician would have been a bad influence on Peter? Lois must have, because she goes to Bill to convince him to move on without Peter.
I need to have a word with you. Wow, you certainly are very persuasive.
You don't become a master of foreign policy without being pretty convincing, and I guess that strategy carries over into sleeping with your friend's wife.
I swiped some money out of Lois's purse. I don't think she'll notice because she's here humping you!
Yeah, it's pretty unforgivable, and there's no amount of listing out Clinton's achievements that'll make it better. I think all it's really doing is making Peter want to jump headfirst out the window.
He reduced the percentage of Americans on welfare to its lowest level in 33 years.
And look, if Lois had to sleep with him to achieve those numbers, then we should be hailing her as an American patriot. But this pretty much ruins Peter's perception of the former president, and he decides to break off his friendship with Bill.
You and I need to have a talk. Boy, you are good. You are really good.
He really will sleep with anyone who isn't named Hillary. This version of Bill Clinton is definitely more of a lovable scamp than other interpretations the show has done. I guess there's a lesson to be learned that you can lose all credibility and still be perceived as cool, like a guy who graduated high school and still hangs around the campus for some reason. And this version of Bill also has a tendency to aim for a bit of the younger crowd. Even acts involving siblings aren't enough to turn him away.
Okay, your turn to spin the bottle, guy dressed like Bill Clinton.
Yeah, dressed like.
Bill Clinton crashing a high school party to make out with girls is pretty bad. Is it worse than two siblings accidentally making out with each other in a closet at said party? I'm not sure, but rest assured, Bill knows a way to make it even weirder.
We're disgusting! We're a disgrace to our family!
Oh, maybe I can get in on this.
Not the time, Mr. President. In fact, I don't think it ever was or will ever be the time for that. No wonder Meg's friend Patty hates the guy.
Not since Slick Willie Clinton lowered the nation's moral standards.
God, give it up, Patty.
But Family Guy's been a lot harder on Clinton's successor, the 43rd president, George W. Bush. The president who led the nation through the War on Terror was not always shown in the best light on the show, usually portrayed as less of a man and more of a child. I guess that's just what happens when the son of a president becomes a president. Or, you fumble the war in the Middle East and the No Child Left Behind Act. Either way, Bush was often portrayed as less than intelligent, both in the show and in pop culture as a whole.
Sir, there's a disaster in New Orleans.
I'm reading Super Fudge.
You gotta come down and deal with this. Don't make me do stuff.
I guess it's up to your own outlook to decide whether or not this was too harsh a portrayal. But what you have to understand is that Super Fudge is a book you absolutely must put the rest of the nation on hold for. But at least he wasn't portrayed as malicious or evil, just a harmless goofball doing his best, like a monkey being handed the keys to an amusement park.
All right, let's do this. Let's kick some ass.
George, the war's over.
What?
Yeah, it's done.
Kinda makes it hard to hate the guy. Well, I guess if you didn't grow up through his presidency, or you don't live in a country that took direct effect from his decisions. In some cases, people might think that they haven't been hard enough on him.
Well, you want to do something else?
I got some blow.
Son of a bitch, took you this long to tell me? Break it out, man!
But the show's never really held back on making sure people knew they viewed the former president in a negative light, even having Jesus come back to Earth to give him a dressing down.
I answer to the power of Jesus Christ.
Oh, well, that's funny because I happen to have Jesus Christ right here.
Yeah, it's a little fanficky to have literal Jesus come down and berate a guy you don't like, but I'm sure many other people were wishing someone got called out on their faith while encouraging war.
You know nothing of my work. How you ever got to be president of anything is totally amazing.
And once again, I'm pretty sure a lot of people were having that exact thought as well. What do you think? Do they have a point, or are the haters mad? I'm a clam who operates outside the jurisdiction of any nation, so you'll have to fill me in. But Bush probably holds the distinction of being one of the most referenced presidents in the show's run, considering he served 2 terms during the early run of the show.
Hey, whoo, you are getting heavy.
I know, I'm 64 3/4.
You sure are a slugger.
And if the worst you can walk away from this show is they portrayed me as an idiot, then I'd say he made it out alright. Wonder what he's up to nowadays. Hopefully he got around to finishing Super Fudge.
Yeah, yippee! Thanks, Uncle Rush. Don't tell my dad.
And while he isn't officially recognized as a traditional president of the United States, for a brief 2-hour stint in both 2002 and 2007, Vice President Dick Cheney was considered the acting president while George W. Bush was having a colonoscopy. So we're gonna talk about him too.
So, you all set to go hunting?
And when Family Guy talked about him, it wasn't nearly as harmless as they did with George Bush. Like that last scene referencing a hunting accident where Dick Cheney accidentally shot Texas attorney Harry Whittington. Accident might be doing the vice president some favors, because I'm sure a lot of people thought that incident was anything but.
Sorry, I thought you were a deer.
Unlike Bush, who was often seen and portrayed as more of a goofball, Cheney was a lot more serious, cold, and unforgiving compared to his president.
Go f*** yourself. Go f*** yourself. Go f*** yourself.
To be fair, walking into a Walmart already feels like someone throwing an F-bomb at you. Why is there always just a random drink left on the shelves? Why is it impossible to find someone to open the sliding glass doors to get a video game out of them? I have no proof, but I can't help but think Cheney's involved in that somehow. And a lot of people assume that because of Cheney's no-nonsense demeanor, the vice president acted more like the president himself. He was considered one of the more powerful vice presidents in history, being a pivotal architect behind the Iraq War and a huge proponent for expanding executive power. And here we were thinking being president was all about golfing and kissing babies.
18% approval ratings. Oh, I'll give you 18% of my foot in your ass.
It's clear from how the show portrays him that Cheney was not someone to be messed with. Unless, of course, you're a cartoon character. They haven't figured out a way to prosecute animated characters yet, but I bet you they're still trying. And following the Bush administration is number 44, President Barack Obama. The first African-American to hold office and the architect of Obamacare, Obama is portrayed in various lights throughout the show. In the episode New Kidney in Town, Barack Obama comes to visit Quahog, and it's mostly considered a positive thing.
Barack Obama makes a visit to James Woods High School.
Yes, it's time to get jiggy with it, Quahog. I thought we had taken that out.
Yeah, it was a pretty interesting time to see a show that made its money on racial jokes juggle the reality of having a black president. Could have been worse, I'll tell you that. But in this episode, Chris wins the opportunity to meet Obama due to writing a moving essay about hope that he completely plagiarized from Meg.
I bet you don't even know what his first name is.
I don't know. Mike?
Well, there is a K in both of those, so you were kinda close. About as close as Mercury is to Pluto. But what does Chris understand about hope? Has he ever looked off into the distance as a stylized stencil illuminated in red and blue? You really don't have a true outlook on life until that happens.
Tell me how those words came to you.
Do you believe in angels, Tom?
Of course I do.
Well, there you go.
Chris eventually owns up to his plagiarism and shares the experience of meeting Obama with his sister. Kinda seems like a jib considering Meg came up with all the words, but that's honestly a better outcome than she's usually given. Plus, it means she gets to stand in awe of a president who seems less like a politician and more like a rock star.
President Mike Obama!
It's definitely one of the more positive portrayals the show has done of a president, even for one who's a member of the same political party as most of the writers. At least Clinton was still shown to be a bit of an idiot. But the show didn't always portray him in the most positive light, especially when it came to Peter. Obama's campaign was all about hope, but I think Peter wasn't feeling much of it when he was elected.
I was in this booth when President Obama was elected. Oh my God, no!
Keep in mind, those were the exact same reactions he had when he witnessed the Challenger exploding. So maybe this is a sign of the writers souring on Obama later into his tenure as president, or maybe it was just done so the show didn't seem so one-sided. Either way, it pretty much means that you can't say the show doesn't target both sides, even if it's one left joke for every 100th right joke. That's just how the cookie crumbles. But of course, this opinion on Obama could just be a Peter thing. Not exactly the biggest example of race equality with this guy. In fact, he sometimes even confuses Obama with someone else.
We walk up wearing our Bill Cosby masks.
Peter, that's President Obama.
Oh, did I just do a racism?
Yeah, something you're probably pretty familiar with already. But I guess it makes sense to use Peter as the conduit for any jabs they wanted to throw at Obama. It's not like Peter is supposed to be viewed as a role model. Not like Stewie. Now that's who you get the best life advice from. And Obama wasn't the only member of his family to draw jokes from Family Guy, as his daughters Malia and Sasha have also been referenced by the show.
Getting alcohol when you're underage isn't as easy as Obama's daughters make it look.
What? Is that true?
I don't know.
Well, we don't know if she bought it, but Malia was spotted playing beer pong back in 2015 when she was only 17. If this isn't a national security scandal for the ages, I don't know what is. Look, some children of presidents partake in underage drinking, some invade Iraq. The pressures of being a president's child all come with their own struggles. And the person who Obama beat out in the 2008 presidency is the late Senator John McCain. A decorated veteran who achieved nationwide respect for surviving as a prisoner of war in Vietnam, McCain was a well-respected politician who also apparently moonlighted as a mystery solver.
But mummies don't hate America.
They sure don't, Rush, but Democrats do.
See, this is what politics is all about. It's not about budgets and state lines, it's about unmasking monsters terrorizing the townsfolk with the help of a celebrity guest of the week. Scooby-Doo had the formula down years ago, and that's why that dog is remembered as one of the greatest presidents this nation has ever seen.
That was a cold swish. Put her there.
Oh, no.
And McCain's presidential campaign, with running mate Sarah Palin, was widely mocked by Democrats, something Family Guy took a step further by linking the campaign to one of the worst people in history.
Yeah, there's something on here. Huh, that's weird.
Maybe that's a bit overboard on the comparison, but that's political satire for you. Or at least Family Guy's brand of satire. Fun fact, the South Park creators thought this joke was so lazy that they decided to try and one-up the show by making an episode that predicted Obama winning the presidency. And following Obama is both the 45th and now 47th president, Donald Trump. And he, well, if you know Family Guy, you know where the show lands on him. Similar to Bill Clinton, Trump was lucky enough, or unlucky enough, to get an entire episode centered around him, but from the jokes to the caricature, it's undeniably one of the harshest the show has done to date.
Wow, the White House is great. There's no wonder you spend 2 days a week here.
So in the episode Trump Guy, Peter ends up working for President Trump. And this portrayal of Trump is brutal, combining rumors of his hair being fake, his use of spray tan, and turning his rumored insecurity over the size of his hands into a real monstrosity of a caricature. And the episode doesn't just stop at his image too, as they also reference seedy things like Trump's admitted habit of, well, you know the phrase.
I'm a huge fan of your board game, and your beef products, and your fraudulent university, and
I wonder what political party the writers most closely align with. Honestly, it's a mystery. And of course, Trump's naughtiness with Meg becomes one of the inciting incidents that eventually makes Peter turn on his boss.
Oh my God, President Trump is assaulting Meg! I can't believe what I just saw, Mr. President.
Just so I'm keeping up with everything, it's a funny joke when Bill Clinton takes advantage of a woman, but it's a terrifying thing when Trump does it. Yeah, I know there are more nuances than that. I'm just trying to drive down the middle of the road here. But if there's one thing maybe more egregious than his actions, it's his taste in adult animated shows.
Bob's Burgers is my favorite animated show.
Wow. There's your headline, Emmy voters.
I guess when you lose out on multiple Emmys to them, the best you can do is sling a little mud and hope it's enough to get voters on your side. Hey, sounds a lot like politics. So Peter ends up quitting working for the White House, but he's not through with Trump yet, having quite a lot to say.
That's why you ain't releasing your taxes, Trump. You're cash poor.
Say that again.
Never ask a woman her weight and never ask a man to release their tax filings. It's just asking for trouble all across the board. So the president is obviously the main target of this roasting, but his own family gets quite a bit of heat too. They're public political figures in their own right, so I'd say they're fair game. This episode makes Eric Trump look like a bubble-eating moron.
Dad, I got one in my mouth. It tastes like soap. Tremendous. Amazing.
Ivanka Trump is a vicious and cruel business mogul.
Tell those kids, if they ever want to see their parents again, they'll make the shoes.
And Melania Trump is a distant wife who hates her husband.
Peter, catch! Kill him in front of me and I you.
Yes, it's just one big happy family over here at the Family Guy White House. The harshness and forwardness of this parody are most likely what turned a lot of people off from the show, but may have also turned people onto it in the process. Well, the former is probably true. There's a reason why it's one of the show's lowest rated episodes ever. And with that episode, the show probably used up most of the jokes they had for President Trump, as he's not really seen throughout the series despite being referenced now and then. However, one of the most biting references to the president came in a scene from American Gigolo that can't be found in all broadcasts of the episode.
Well, as long as you didn't try to her and she was single.
I did try and her. She was married.
Oh, you're awesome!
If anything, this is revealing Peter to be one of the biggest flip-floppers in history. So yeah, for the initial broadcast of this episode, the show added Peter's voice to the now infamous clip of Trump's locker room talk, which had just recently been unearthed. Thankfully, it has subtitles to identify who's saying what. This kinda just sounds like Peter's regular dialogue at the Clam.
Hey, when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Whatever you want.
Well, like grab him by the hand?
Grab him by the
Oh my.
And following President Trump's first presidency is former Vice President Joe Biden, who became the United States' 46th president. The guy who was once on Parks and Rec before becoming president has been surprisingly absent from the show compared to some of the other past presidents, but did make an appearance on the show in Brokeback Swanson during his time as vice president.
I think he's bitter because he never got the credit he deserved for killing Osama bin Laden.
Your husband's a Navy SEAL?
So when Brian gets himself into an affair involving the wife of a Navy SEAL, Brian learns that the soldier never got to achieve the peak example of respect for his work.
Yeah, that's right. I was the only one who didn't get to meet Biden.
He didn't even want to meet the actual president at the time? This guy can't even dream a full dream. But when Brian gets stuck as the SEAL's dog, he realizes that the guy's unfulfilled desire might just be his ticket out of this situation.
We figured you'd say no to us, but not to Vice President Joe Biden.
Oh my God!
Thank goodness Chris just happened to have the vice president on speed dial. A true man of the people who probably gets some truly heinous calls daily if he's just giving out his number like that.
Hey, you guys watch Veep?
No.
Yeah, it's all fake.
Yet we said no.
It doesn't really say much about him or lean into any easily parodyable characteristics, something that would be pretty common throughout most references to him on the show. You can call it favoritism, but it could also be a case of him being really boring. And Biden was once again seen in HTT Pete when he was neither vice president nor president, and this time he had even less to say.
I'm Peter Griffin, and this is the 6-Second Talk Show. My guest tonight is Joe Biden. And that's all the time we have. Thanks for watching. Good night.
About as forgetful as his actual presidency, one might say. Not me, obviously, but some people, you know? Some people who aren't me. I am getting a thumbs up from my producer for doing a great job of being unbiased. And when Biden actually became president, he would only get passing mentions here and there without ever really appearing on the show itself.
God, they can do whatever they want in Delaware.
Thanks for nothing, Sleepy Joe.
You sure dunked on him there, Family Guy. It's kind of surprising to see as few references to Biden in the show compared to other presidents like Trump, Obama, and Bush. Maybe that was really all they could think of. An idea list on a whiteboard in the writer's room that just read Sleepy Joe for 4 years. And another prominent vice president in American history is Al Gore, who served as the 45th vice president under Bill Clinton. Al Gore actually ran for president against George W. Bush, but lost in a surprise upset that actually made Family Guy have to rewrite a scene in the episode Mr. Griffin Goes to Washington, since they predicted he'd win.
But I tell you what didn't kill her. Smoking.
You have our support, Griffin.
Incredibly short-sighted parallels equivalent to when South Park had to rewrite an entire episode after they predicted that Hillary Clinton would have won the 2016 election. But Family Guy would imagine a world where Gore did win and meet the Quagmires.
With President Gore's universal health care, people are living much longer these days.
It's fun to dream of what could have been, isn't it? It's also funny that this alternate reality is practically caused by Lois and Peter not ending up together. I know true love conquers all and everything, but better healthcare may just conquer a little bit more.
Oh my God, Peter, you can't marry Lois.
And Gore was known for his staunch support of environmentalism and combating the effects of global warming, something that pop culture would continue to reference long after he was running for election.
Climate change had rendered the iceberg nothing more than a small cube.
You know, I actually don't know if I've heard Al Gore's voice before. Does he actually sound that much like Forrest Gump? Too bad about that iceberg, though. I guess all those people on the Titanic too are just gonna have to live long, happy lives. What a shame. But while he's viewed as an environmental champion by some and a crackpot by others, I'm sorry, I can't move past this. Is that really what he sounds like?
There it is again!
It's probably just wind, honey.
It's not the wind!
And another presidential hopeful that never got to land themselves in the high office is Bernie Sanders. The independent senator from Vermont made a name for himself in past elections, advocating for democratic socialism policies and birthing the movement/cult known as the Bernie Bros. If you're still feeling the burn after all these years, you might want to see a doctor. They've probably got a cream for that.
Is that Bernie Sanders?
That guy's always asking for a little hand, whether it be in reshaping democracy or just hitching a ride. Bernie's reputation has always been pretty down the middle. Some see him as someone willing to shake up the political system, and others see him as a crazy old man yelling about billionaires. Either way, he's been a prominent figure in politics for the last 10 years, and while you may not agree with his ideologies, you kinda have to give it to him that he knows how to stunt in the winter.
I haven't used a wipey cloth in 35 years. You know who uses wipey cloths? Billionaires.
Another prominent politician who never made it into the Oval Office without being a +1 is Hillary Clinton. The former First Lady to President Bill Clinton, Hillary would later become Secretary of State and the U.S. Senator of New York before embarking on an unsuccessful campaign for the presidency, becoming the first woman to top a major U.S. party's presidential ticket. But back in the early 2000s, she was kinda just remembered as the woman Bill cheated on.
Oh, what the hell? Come here, Hillary.
Which, you know, is kind of a disservice to someone who advocated for women's rights for years. Oh, but those emails. Those dang emails. People used to complain about something in her emails years ago. Did she just use the White House email address to sign up for DoorDash or something? But there was a time when Hillary was only really ever known as the wife of Bill Clinton, so it probably makes sense why she wanted to carve her own name out in the political theater.
Well, I bet if Hillary Clinton becomes senator, she'll straighten it out, even though she could never straighten out Bill.
Well, she definitely achieved far more than the average First Lady, that much is for sure. And there's no straightening out Bill, unfortunately. After all, both of them were a bunch of hippies. You can't wrangle someone who went to the original Woodstock. Their brains are probably fried beyond the point of recognition. But Hillary is probably most well known in the modern day as the Democratic candidate who ran against Donald Trump in 2016, an election that had a running theory that Russia may have meddled in some way.
Over here is where we rig every American election. Also, American football.
No, I don't know too much about all that, but if it's true, it seriously deteriorates the heart and soul of what makes America a beautiful country. I'm talking about rigging football, by the way. Keep your hands off our concussion-creating sport, Russia. Another prominent U.S. politician to face the Family Guy wrath is Mitch McConnell, the longest-serving Senate party leader in U.S. history, representing the Republican Party on Capitol Hill. McConnell is usually likened to a turtle by his detractors, and Family Guy decided to take that literally in their portrayal of him. Look, I don't know very much about McConnell and his accomplishments, and I doubt most of the American public does either. So it makes sense why the show went with a bit more of a low-hanging fruit shot at the party leader. But leave it to esteemed political commentator Brian to have a more informed insight into McConnell.
And I just pretend that tennis ball is Mitch McConnell trying to roll back subsidies on the Affordable Care Act, and I'm like, nope!
And another Republican politician Family Guy took the time to dunk on is Colorado's former representative Lauren Boebert. The controversial right-wing figure generated a little career-defining moment, not from anything in politics, but from a moment during the Beetlejuice musical. Apparently, she was escorted out for disruptive behavior, which included vaping, singing loudly, and allegedly getting a bit too handsy with her date.
Congresswoman Boebert, could you please stop touching me there? I'm a woman. My pants are just bunched up.
Look, I get it. Some plays and musicals just get the blood pumping and the hormones raging. But Beetlejuice? What exactly about this dead guy is getting people all hot and bothered? I guess I'm not hot topic enough to get it. But let's hop to the other side of the aisle with Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi. The Democratic leader was the first female Speaker of the House of Representatives, and over her long tenure in Washington, has drawn ire from both the Republicans and people inside her own party.
How do we stop the Pelosi agenda?
Hey, I'll tell you how. You strap her to a board, put a cloth in her mouth, and pour water over it.
A little harsh, but this is just what they talk about in political theater. If we can't waterboard our politicians, then who can we waterboard? This is America. We got to where we are today through waterboarding.
And she's addicted to Come on, you're with me on this.
Of course she's addicted to but you can't just say that.
It's true, you can't just throw harmful, baseless accusations around like that without any proof. Anyway, I wonder what the Congresswoman is up to now.
Who are you? How did you get in here?
While I can't say this confirms the rumor, it does leave you with much to think about. Honestly, my main thought while talking politics revolves around how many politicians are hitting the pipe as we speak. And another prominent Democrat to get lampooned is Andrew Cuomo, a three-time governor of New York whose career came to an abrupt ending after a slew of harassment allegations and a nursing home death scandal. Suffice to say, it's those later years that Family Guy chooses to remember him by.
Who wants to see my nipple rings? Now bring that face over here for an unwanted smooch.
Great, now I have "Does Andrew Cuomo have nipple rings" on my Google search history. Well, his administration said no, but I'll let you be the judge of that based on these pics. Maybe he's just got some rare disorder where his go horizontal instead of straight forward. But let's hop back over to the other side of the aisle, where we find Republican Governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, who was also a two-time Republican presidential candidate. Christie has had several jokes thrown at him by the show over the years, usually comparing him to Meg and vice versa.
And what if they card you?
Don't worry, I got it covered.
Not too sure who comes out on the worse end of that comparison, but Meg's gotta accept that if she's gonna use the governor's likeness, she better be prepared to be mistaken for him every now and then.
I'm sorry everyone thinks you're a historically unpopular fatso from New Jersey.
But someone a bit more unpopular is George Santos, a former US representative from New York who was disgraced following pleading guilty to numerous felony charges like identity theft. Meg better watch her back or she's gonna end up just like him.
Hi, I'm gay, straight, Jewish George Santos, and I approve this message.
Once someone commits a lie that big, it's hard to tell what was ever really true about them to begin with. Is George even his real name? Is he one of them reptilians running the government from the shadows? Does he even have a prescription for those glasses?
This was written 18 months ago, new lies not included.
And we've all heard about George W. Bush, but what about his younger brother Jeb Bush? The former governor of Florida has arguably been living in the shadow of his father and brother for many years now, especially after he failed to win the Republican nomination for the 2016 election.
Honey, do you think I'll ever be president?
No, no, no.
Okay, that was more of a joke directed towards Jeb's wife, but you get the point. The guy's had minor political victories here and there, but the big one has always eluded him. It really was all over after he asked that whole room to clap, wasn't it?
Just think, somewhere in this state, right now, Jeb Bush is eating a live puppy.
But what's your favorite Family Guy political parody? Let us know down in the comments, and be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you liked what you saw here and want to see more.